What made you want to explore the relationship between author and character in this book?
You know, I think the book is really about identity. And I feel like the character, the book is about an author, P.J. Wallace, who's created this character, Monica, which she has revived from her childhood when she and her sister were young, and they had created this character, Monica. And she's, down on her luck, and then she thinks she's leaving Monica, this imaginary character, behind. But one day when she's down on her luck, she suddenly remembers Monica.
Okay.
So she resurrects Monica. And Monica is the more perfect version of herself. Monica's always happy, and she's always smiling, and you just want to be her because she's so happy and nothing ever goes wrong for Monica. And it's this idea of how we all create a persona in our 20s and 30s. And then as one gets older, which you haven't gotten there yet.
I haven't gotten there yet?
No, you're still in your Monica days. Everything's working for you.
But PJ writes Monica into this big star, and then it gets really complicated around identity, right?
Well, yes. And it's, there's an actress who plays Monica, and I'm trying to think of how to get into this.
What was so interesting for me was that it gets so complicated. So Monica becomes this big character, becomes this star.
Right.
The actress that wins the role of Monica wins the role by playing the PJ.
Right,
imitating the creator of that character.
Right.
Yeah, so there's all these complicated dimensions.
There are all these complicated kinds of things, and Monica's she's an imaginary, or she's basically a imaginary character in a sense, created by a character. So there are lots of layers, and Monica comes to dominate both P.J. Wallace and the actress who plays her.
Monica. Yeah,
and the two become the writer and the actress become best friends, and they bond over Monica, and this idea that Monica is going to, in a sense, save both of them. And at first she does, but then, of course, real life comes in and makes everything much more complicated.
Yeah.
And I also really, really wanted to write a farce. And there's mistaken identity in the book. There's, an explosion, and I was looking at sort of the classic comic tropes, and of farce and comedy, and these tropes go back to Shakespeare.
And mistaken identity.
Mistaken identity, which was something that was used a lot in Shakespeare, because the mistaken identity allows us to sort of see the characters in a different light. So it's really a device. So I wanted to use a lot of these comic devices. And, then, of course, I happen to be someone who, I love broad comedy.
Mm-hmm.
I love movies like It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. And I wanted to incorporate that into the book as well.
Well, here was my question, because I'm seeing all these complicated things about identity. PJ, who, again, created the character Monica, even her friends confuse her with Monica. Her husband confuses her with Monica.
Yes.
But there's an added dimension here, and this was my curiosity. How much were you playing with your audience's confusion around this whole idea, too, because of Carrie Bradshaw? How much were you playing with our perception as well, in a Shakespearean way, like a whole other dimension to this thing?
I was probably unconsciously playing with that, because when I'm writing, I'm really in a creative head and I'm in a flow. And for me, this book felt like it needed to be written. It was somehow demanding to be written. So it's sometimes only after I go back and I read it that I see these things. When I'm writing it, I'm so into it and going on gut instinct and just what feels right that I'm not exactly sure until I've actually finished the book and have some distance from it. Because when
you can't possibly see all those layers and deliberately.
No. And it's just, part of being in the flow and creating a whole fictional world. And, the reality is that, Monica is a metaphor for how we get trapped in a persona. But the reality is this happens to so many actors. Think of the actors on Seinfeld or the actors on Friends. Or Mary Tyler Moore. It sort of goes on and on with how the public does get confused with, a completely fictional character that feels really real to them.
Did you ever relate to that?
I did, but probably not in the way that people would think that I did. I created this character of Carrie Bradshaw, who at that time really was my alter ego. And I was originally going to write Sex and the City in first person. And it started as a column, but then my parents said, "Oh, we're getting a subscription to The Observer." And I thought, I better change my name. So I came up with the name Carrie Bradshaw. And the book was partly fiction and partly journalism, where I interviewed men and women about a certain topic. Like, for instance, one was the topic of threesomes. I gathered all these men together and I interviewed them. And some of the things they said were pretty eye-opening.
You're like, that's going in the book.
I mean, there were things like, they had threesomes. They never worked out. Somebody always got angry. And, they had
Just remember this is public radio. Just remember that.
I won't say anymore. But it didn't turn out to be what they expected it was going to be. But so it was a mixture of those kinds of things. And then I sold the rights probably in maybe 1995. And then in 1997, we wrote the pilot, and then we shot it and shot the pilot, and then they ordered it to series in 1998. So, and Sex and the City really didn't take off until 2000. So for me, there were 6 years where, it was just part of the fabric of my life. So I didn't, it wasn't like, oh, all of a sudden I was Carrie Bradshaw.
It was more generally you have a persona when you're younger type of thing.
Yes, exactly. And when I started writing it, I was going out a lot, and I was always asking questions and having all kinds of adventures. But after I wrote Sex and the City, I really turned to what I always had seen myself doing since the age of 8, which was to only write fiction. And so after that, I wrote Four Blondes and Trading Up. And, Four Blondes was unexpectedly a big bestseller. And, so from there, I felt like I was just continuing, my work.
Your calling
as a novelist,
yes, which you felt since you were
continuing my
8 years
calling,
old.
and Sex and the City was fantastic and wonderful, but I it was a TV series. It didn't feel like it was necessarily my life.
Yeah.
And I think because I lived in New York, making a TV series was, it just seemed like, jobs for everybody. You know what I'm saying?
It didn't seem as central to your life as maybe other people thought it was. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes. I mean, it was a part of my life, but being me was central to my life, and doing my work and pursuing, my voice and my vision. So that's always been my work. So I feel like Sex and the City is a part of it. But I also, because I've had 2 other books have been made into TV series, and everything I've written has been optioned, and scripts have been written. And I often think when something becomes a hit, like Sex and the City, there's so many unseen factors involved, and there's so many things that can go wrong when you're making a TV series or a movie, and it just doesn't hit. And these are,
things outside of your control.
Yeah, these things are all outside of one's control. So I have the, for me, these things are dependent on, as we say in Hollywood, the Hollywood gods. If they shine down upon you and everything lines up, then you're really lucky. And I think for most people, it's, it's lightning in a bottle, and it happens once in your life. And it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
But, but I'm still getting up every day and writing new things.
And doing your work. For those of you just tuning in, you're listening to Q. I'm Shad, and my guest is Candace Bushnell. Her latest novel is Killing Monica. In Killing Monica, Pandy, or PJ, has a kind of frenemy relationship with Sandra Beth Schnauzer.
Right.
First of all, I have to stop you there. Do you have a story of where you came up with that name, Sandra Beth Schnauzer?
I don't. I was just sitting there, and I came up with a name, and I thought it was a funny name. But when I think of a name, usually the whole character comes to me, and I saw this girl on a billboard, and actually the first time we see Sandra Beth, she was a model in Los Angeles, and she's on a billboard, and she's holding a little wolf pup in her hands, and the tagline is, "What if dogs could see stars too?" So I'll come up with something like that, and then
it strikes you as funny.
Very, but I love that image in my head of this, girl with her hair flowing and like looking out into the sky, and this very, this girl from the American West.
Yeah, kind of all-American gal.
This all-American gal, kind of a cowgirl type. So
and that's the actress who plays Monica in the movies.
Yes, and and I saw her as somebody who, she takes advantage of the opportunities that come along, but she isn't, it's like she's almost a little bit of a drifter.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, I sort of saw her as a little bit of a drifter, and she fell into this, and and then she's going along with it, but she also can put it down, or she thinks she can put it down and walk away.
But she's also very tied to this Monica.
Well, she's
character.
She's tied in the same way that actors are always tied to projects. I mean, basically, you can get fired, but you can't quit. And I think that's something that people don't understand, is that actors sign a contract at the beginning of, before they've even shot 1 second of film.
Yeah.
And that contract can last for 8 years. Yeah. That's pretty standard.
And you're locked into that contract.
And you're locked
so
into
you
it.
Automatically are going to have that complicated relationship with that character. Now, from a reader's perspective, I'm sure you've gotten this question a million times. They obviously relate that to Sarah Jessica Parker. So is there anything you want to clarify right here on our radio?
The character's so not Sarah Jessica Parker. And the character feels so... the character feels so different that it doesn't feel anything like Sarah Jessica Parker to me at all.
So what do you think is...
It's a very different kind of character. And Sandra Beth she's never been married. She's had a really hard life. And she was a stripper. And she really wants to take control of her life and not always be, in a sense, under the male gaze.
Is that something you really wanted to explore with this book too?
Yes. I mean, I think that the characters are pretty extreme in their feelings about the patriarchy. And it's not deliberate when I'm writing it. It just comes out. But for me, it's like really pushing the envelope is a way for me to get people to think about things just a little bit differently. You know, I don't expect that people are going to totally go there as far as the characters have gone and their points of view. But they do make some points about relationships and women in the workplace and women not being, their creative work is not as valued as men's. And I mean, these are things that we've seen certainly recently in the news in terms of Hollywood, with actresses not being paid as much as men and executives not being paid, female executives not being paid as much as men. So it felt right to kind of dig around in there. I mean, I'm not afraid to like dig around at like the sore points. And
potentially upset people or whatever, if it's to prove make a good point.
I think it's all done very, very tongue in cheek. And I mean, to me, the book is it's pretty farcical. Deliberately, so that we feel like we are in a parallel universe or, a separate universe. And for me, being in that separate universe is the place where one can explore possible truths that are very, very uncomfortable in reality.
Well, I think the underlying humor is unmistakable in the book. Really quickly before we run out of time, you said at the outset this book is fundamentally about identity. So you're going through this comic lens. What did you want to say about identity?
Well, I think it's about identity and reinvention. And I think what I really want to say is, at a certain point, I feel like we all need to reinvent ourselves. It happens usually in your mid-40s. And, it's sort of known as like the midlife crisis. But there's something very psychic and psychological to it. And it's a little bit of an existential crisis where you need to re-examine why you're here. And it's a very natural kind of thing if you think about, the lifespan of a human being. In your 20s and 30s, it's about, and early 40s, it would naturally be about children and procreation. And then the children grow up and leave the nest. And, so then that's a time again when we need to
examine again.
You need to examine again and find out, okay, now what is my purpose and what is my meaning and who am I now? So for me, it's opening yourself up to new possibilities and not clinging to the past and trying to be that person who
What has
you
that been
were.
like in your life?
For me, it's really meant, deepening, trying to go deeper in my work. I mean, for me, it's about mastery and really trying to master this very unwieldy thing called the novel. And it's about being creative and exploring other creative outlets. And for me, some of that was really sparked by social media, Instagram. All of a sudden I was actually really looking at pictures and the composition of photographs and objects in a photograph.
And that inspired your writing.
And that really inspired my writing. So when I was writing the book, it's like the camera is in Pandy's head and we're seeing what she sees. And it's also, I tend to write set pieces in my books where they're at a big event and different characters are coming in, and that's where the action takes place in these set pieces.
So it starts with imagining that event, that setting.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I usually will think of, I want to have a set piece here at the Woman Warrior of the Year Awards and what that looks like with all the screens. And then they're on this revolving stage called a Lazy Susan. I don't know if that exists. I just made it up. But I thought there's so much comic potential here. Well, so I kind of see it as a movie, I guess.
Well, it's certainly a funny book and lots of complicated things going on in terms of identity and reinvention. So thank you so much for coming in, Candace.
Thank you.